Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be telling you about the worst books that I read in 2023, and I think I've only got one DNF as well, which isn't too bad. This year overall has been a really good reading year for me. Like, I have loved, I would say, the majority of books that I've read, but then the books that I didn't enjoy, I really did not enjoy. So I thought I would make a video about it and tell you guys. But the first one I want to talk about is a book that I don't own, and I'm really glad I didn't end up buying it because the hardback was like $60 or something, and I did not like the book. That is Acts of Service by Lillian Fishman, and according to Goodreads I gave this one 2.5 out of 5 stars, but for the life of me, I can't remember actually reading this. I looked up my review on Goodreads to kind of jog my memory a little bit, and I apparently loved the author's prose and thought it was really beautiful. And I do actually remember this book raising a lot of questions regarding like sexuality, power, queerness, and how all of those things intersect as well. But I do remember that I feel like it was kind of touched upon but not really discussed further. Like, it was all very surface level, and I don't necessarily think that things can't be surface level in a book, or that things do have to be, you know, like a big discussion. But it felt like this book wanted to do that, and that's what it was trying to aim to do, and I feel like it really fell flat in doing that. The next book is If We Ever Meet Again by Anna Huang, and I want to make it clear, I did actually enjoy this more than I enjoyed Twisted Love. And in saying that, I DNF'd Twisted Love last year, so me finishing this alone is an indication that I did enjoy this more than her other book. But in saying that, I think I still gave this like 1.5 out of 5 stars. It was just like, there was not a lot going on. The characters weren't very interesting. It was a really quick read. Like, I read this in a few hours, and I suppose this would be like a good palate cleanser in between other books, but that's about it. Like, it was easy enough to read, and I suppose entertaining enough to read that I like got through it and finished it quickly. But it's basically just about Blake and Farah, who are, you know, opposites of each other. They end up meeting wherever they are in the world, Shanghai, and they study there together for a year. This just like went in one ear and out the other. This was just very uninteresting. I don't know if I'm ever going to pick up something from this author again, just because like this being her better work for me just isn't enough to keep me going. I just did not really care for this at all, and from memory as well, like the writing wasn't the best, and it was just like a little bit cringe. Next up is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Now, I read this one fairly recently actually. I was so excited for this because it is like a YA fantasy, and like the romance in here was meant to be really great, and I'm not even like annoyed that the romance wasn't that good, but like just the book in general wasn't that good, to be honest. I did a whole vlog on it. I gave this one I think 2 out of 5 stars just because the ending had me maybe intrigued enough for book 2. Like, I'm hoping that book 2 is better, but I don't want to get my hopes up. The author said that she took inspiration from Red Queen and Hunger Games for this book, and Red Queen I thought was like okay when I read it like way back when, but I really love the Hunger Games series. You can really tell that some scenes in this book are just like straight up copies from Hunger Games, and like I feel like everybody takes inspiration from other writers or other media they consume in general, which is fine, but like this just had way too many like glaring similarities, and I wasn't imagining what was going on in this book. I was just distracted by it and was thinking about other books that this was inspired by, and the characters were just really bland. I did not care for them at all. Like, I wanted to like Peyton and Kai so bad, but I just didn't care. Like, I almost DNF'd this, and this almost put me in a reading slump as well. Like, this was a slog for me to get through. I was really struggling with this one. I understand that this is obviously the first book in a series, but I still think that while things can be left unanswered, there still needs to be some questions answered or properly established in the first place, which I don't think this book did very well. And I was just bored. I was literally bored the entire time reading this, and I really wanted to love it, but yeah, I wish this lived up to the hype for me, but it did not. Next up is The New Me by Halle Butler, and this one is like another one of those like millennial sad girl, I hate my job kind of books, and I do enjoy those sometimes, but this one, it just was kind of boring. Like, some of the stuff that Millie, like the main character, was saying, like, I'm like, yeah, sure, relatable, but apart from that, like, she was kind of insufferable, which I know is the point of a lot of these books, and I can normally get on board with a unlikable or an insufferable character, but I don't know, there was just something about Millie that I just did not care about at all, and I wasn't like rooting for her at any point. I wasn't intrigued by her story enough at any point. Overall, it was just a very bland book to read, and I feel like in a lot of these types of books, not a lot happens anyway, but you're still kind of intrigued by, you know, the character case study or the character thoughts, or, you know, are they gonna be able to turn their life around by the end of it? But we didn't really get any of that in this book. I don't know, it was just kind of dry, and I was kind of happy to be done with this after finishing reading it. Next up is a really recent read for me, and if you watch my recent vlog, you might know what I'm talking about, but that is The 100 Loves of Juliet by Evelyn Skye. I rated this one 1 star. I was not expecting this to be like maybe my worst read of the year, just because like I got this really cheap. I was excited about it, and it's basically like a Romeo Juliet retelling, if you will, where Romeo is like an immortal being and Juliet gets reincarnated over and over again. And I thought at the worst it's just gonna be like, you know, like an average sort of predictable time, but the characters were so uninteresting. Any sort of character that we got from them was just a reflection of their past lives, which I understand to an extent, obviously, but it felt like that's all they were. Like, there wasn't anything else sort of surrounding it, and it's actually tackled in the book as well, and it's discussed in the book, which makes this even more mind-blowing as well. And throughout this we get lots of like mini vignettes about like their past lives and how Juliet dies each time, and it's just so fucking boring. It's just the same thing over and over, which you expect, but it's just not done in like a fun to read or interesting way. I don't know, the more I think about this book, the more I think I should have expected to not like it, considering, you know, it is sort of predictable and stuff, and maybe a lot of my criticisms are a bit harsh. I just still think it could have been a bit more interesting. And then I was sort of, you know, leaning towards like a 2-star read for this, and then the ending happened. And the ending, like the last 50 pages of this, literally felt like I was reading or like watching a really bad action movie. Like, there were like hackers, there were like martial arts scenes, and it was just absolutely bizarre. Like, I have no fucking idea what I read to this day. It was the most bizarre ending that could have happened for this book, and it was just, you'd think that would be exciting, but it wasn't. It was just weird, and I am really sad that I didn't like this so much, and I think it was disappointing. I feel really bad because you can tell when you read the author's note that this is quite a personal story for the author, and that it would have been cathartic for her to write. But at the end of the day, like story-wise, character-wise, everything, I just did not vibe with this book at all. I'm going to tell you about the book that I DNF'd, and then I'm going to tell you about some books that weren't necessarily like as bad as the books that I just discussed then, but they were like disappointing reads for me. So they're like, you know, kind of low 3 stars, if that makes sense. So the book that I DNF though was Priest by Sierra Simone. So I picked this up sort of on a whim when I was in Melbourne earlier this year. I had heard that this was really smutty, but I thought I'll just like quickly read it while I have some downtime. But I just could not even finish this. Like, I had heard that this book had lots of smut in there, but it's literally just smut. Like, there's nothing else beyond this. By page 79, I was done with this. Like, I put it down one day and then did not pick it back up. I was not invested in this at all. I don't know, maybe I was expecting too much from this book. Maybe I was expecting too much for a forbidden priest romance story. I can see why some people might like this, like a forbidden romance with a priest and the woman. But also, like, this is from like the guy's point of view. And you're just like, you're reading about how horny he is all the time. And I can't do that. I just was not interested. It was too much for me. And so this book is just not for me. I'm probably not going to be picking this back up or the rest of the series. So the next 2 books are books that weren't as bad as these books that I just talked about, but they were disappointing reads for me because I was really excited for them. And so the first one is Happy Place by Emily Henry. Now, I did give this one 3 stars, and I even started like annotating and like tabbing it and stuff, and like, I'm not going to unhaul this, but I think my hopes were just too high for this because I loved Emily Henry's previous work so much. Like, I loved Book Lovers so much, and this was just a very different story, which like isn't necessarily a problem with the book. I think it was just maybe my expectations were wrong. This is a second chance romance between Harriet and Wynne, and they are in the middle of like a divorce or separation, and then they end up going on one last holiday with their friend group, and then they sort of, you know, end up like getting back together. And this entire book is mostly the miscommunication trope, if I'm being honest, which isn't necessarily the main problem. I would say like my main problem with this was just like, I didn't really care that much about Harriet and Wynne. I know I should, like, logically, I know I should really like them as people and like care about them, but I found them kind of boring, and I didn't really care about their friend group. In fact, a couple of people in their friend group really pissed me off, and it just made me angry. And I feel like if I read this book maybe a few years ago, I would have loved this. I would have eaten this up. I would have rated this 5 out of 5 stars. But like, where I am in my life now, having kind of already been through, not necessarily the exact things that happen in this book, but like been through a lot of these thoughts where it's like, you know, like starting from scratch at like an older age, or like, you know, can you really like have new friends like later on, or like, can you do this thing again and like start over at any age? Like, I've already sort of mentally gone through that myself, and so I think a couple of years ago, like, this would have destroyed me or helped me, I don't know. But I think just like where I am now, it was just kind of like, yeah, okay, like I get it. And again, like, that's not necessarily a problem with the book, I just don't think this was for me. And then the final book that was unfortunately a disappointment for me, again, I was just really hyped about this after years and years and years of it being on my bookshelf, and that is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. This one is about Isabel, who is a painter, and in this world humans have craft and fairies aren't able to do any craft. So like, they can't cook, they can't paint, they can't sing, they can't do anything like that. And so they really revere humans who are really good at a specific craft like painting. And then one day a fairy prince wants to have his portrait done by Isabel, and she ends up drawing or painting sorrow in his eyes and making him look weak, then he kind of like comes back and is like, you made me look weak, I'm gonna take you away into my lands. It's high stakes in some areas, but overall it's kind of like low key. There was just something about it that just didn't gel with me or my taste, and I was kind of just bored. I think there was just a disconnect between the characters and myself, because honestly, like, everything else about this book would totally be up my alley, and I feel like I should have loved something like this. Like, the writing was beautiful, the world was beautiful, it was like really different and not what you'd expect for like a fairy book, and especially like a fairy fantasy in the context of how a lot of those stories are today. And because my expectations were like up here after this being on my TBR literally since like 2017, 2018 when this came out, I was just a little bit disappointed after all of that time, but that's okay. So they are all of the worst books or disappointing reads that I read in 2023. My next video will be my best books of 2023, so keep an eye out for that. So I'll be talking about all of the books that I loved this year, and there's so many of them. I'm really excited to talk about it. But if you disagree with any of these opinions, or even if you agree with them, anything like that, let me know. If you enjoyed this video as well, please leave it a thumbs up and subscribe down below. It would really help me out. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day or night wherever you are, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.